You are listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report, episode 193.2, our girls basketball state finals recap with Michelle Garmon and Grant Shouse. Michelle and Grant both took in all four games on Saturday and have reports from all of it.
You're listening to the Central Indiana Sports Report with your host, Greg Mengel.
Welcome, basketball fans. Today is March 3rd, 2025. It's a Monday, so it's another day for the Central Indiana Sports Report. I'm your host, Greg Mengel, and I love Central Indiana sports. Here with Grant Shouse from the Action Sports Network and Michelle Garmon from the Tipton Tribune and Elwood Call Leader, and they both love Central Indiana sports too. And that's why they are here today. Producer Susie is in the control room in Jeffersonville. Coming up, we will talk to Grant and Michelle about all four of Saturday's girls basketball state championships. But before we get to that, and before I introduce Grant and Michelle, please go subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single segment, even if you've already subscribed at SoundCloud, Spotify, Apple, or Amazon. Please go subscribe at our YouTube channel. We're going to start doing a lot of cool stuff there. All right, thanks, guys, for being here. Grant, Michelle, and I want to start with Class A. We'll start with the first game that happened, and Grant was there for all four games, and I'm going to let him start Borden's first girls basketball ever state championship. In fact, they had never done one more than a sectional. A really good program over the years, coached by Terry Rodemaker, through some really good years, where they were a state championship contender, but also had teams in their sectional that were as well. Big deal for them. And of course, Matt Vick was part of their boys state championship team back in 2016. So he's now the toast of the town. Grant, your thoughts on Borden's first girls basketball state championship?
It was a great game. Lafayette Central Catholic controlled most of the first half, and the media timeout in the second quarter changed things. Something woke up in that Borden team. They had a really great dynamic duo with their 6 foot point guard, Riley Rarick, and then they had a 5'11 kind of stretch forward and Ava Wheeler. Um, like I said, they're the dynamic duo, and Lafayette Central Catholic got up 25-12 at one point in the first half. Timeout happens, and then Borden ends the half on a 12-0 run. Got it down. It was 25-24 going to halftime. LCC had the lead by one. Um, and then in the second half, they just kept going. And at one point, they took the lead, and then they went on a 24-3 run through the mid second quarter to the end of the third quarter. They were on a 24 to or midway through the third, they were on a 24-3 run, and it was so impressive. And then they never looked back, and things looked so bleak for them in terms of they were down so much, and to come back the way they did, they truly showed where they were a state champion team. They're still in 1A, and they don't graduate as single senior. Like they are obviously going to be the favorite to win it next year. I think you could see them in the Hall of Fame Classic maybe next year. So we'll see. But that was a really good Borden team. It's got to be disappointing for LCC, but of course they're young, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see them back there playing each other again next year.
Yeah, it could be. You said something about Borden in the Hall of Fame Classic. If they are, that's fine. I don't see the Hall of Fame Classic going two small schools back to back with having South Knox this year and then going with Borden. And part of that is
They usually
I
try to
don't,
have at least one.
pardon?
They usually try to have at least one smaller school.
Yeah.
Right, but sometimes that can be a smaller 3A or a higher. It will be interesting because they do. The thing is, the big part about the Hall of Fame is, um, you know, you have to guarantee you're going to sell so many tickets. And I didn't realize that at first until the Tipton boys team went, and then Tipton had a girls team and lobbying with the Brooklyn Judah, and those guys, and that's when um, Corey Fernand was talking about. Well, he said the thing is, he said you just have to you have to sell so many, you're going to guarantee. And if you don't, you got to make it up as a school. And so it can be a financial risk. It'll be interesting. What kind of fans because I feel terrible. Um, I bought the package to watch all 4 games, but I didn't watch the A game. But I've got it on demand, and I am going to go back and watch it. What kind of crowd did they have for the single A game? Because I do know they had a great crowd for the 2A game.
The crowd all day was really impressive. Borden, of course, we knew they were going to bring a lot of fans. I was
The
honestly,
entire town.
the entire town was there. Honestly, Michelle, I was surprised of how many fans Lafayette Central Catholic brought, and they didn't bring as much as Borden brought. They had the weakest crowd out of all 8 teams, but they still filled their section of the lower bowl. Um, I was impressed with their crowd and
Well, I will say this about Central Catholic. They probably, as far as smaller private school, some of the private schools, they probably have as good a fan turnout as and better than a lot of them, which maybe it's because they're used to playing for championships and girls and boys
right.
stuff, whether it be baseball, volleyball, basketball, I mean, so that's the one thing I will say. I Central Catholic does not um, do bad crowds. I remember a few years ago, boys regional championship. It was Tri Central and Central Catholic, and that place was at Case Arena in Frankfurt, and that place was packed.
So speaking of Central Catholic, they finished the season 25-5. They are a three-time state champion. Their last one still 2016. They had won 13 in a row coming in. In the 2A game, it kind of went as we expected, Michelle. Number one, South Knox was the team to beat all year in Class 2A, and
Oh,
they were not able to be beaten. They finished 28-2. Their only two losses to really good 4A teams. This, of course, was their first appearance in the state championship. They couldn't get by North Knox for a long time.
but
And Rensselaer Central was number 2 in the state, and honestly, not close to South Knox.
No.
would you not say that may have been one of the most disappointing games I've ever seen? The turnovers were atrocious.
It was so it
And it was
was.
sloppy. It wasn't like the two teams were necessarily forcing anything. I I was I was really I mean, I think South Knox finally played the way I thought they were, would play there in the fourth
Mhm.
quarter, but I was very disappointed. And I was disappointed in both teams. I couldn't believe that Rensselaer's coach had all 5 timeouts left in the fourth quarter
Yeah,
with the sloppiest his team played.
yeah. South Knox has a girl, Ella Bobe, who's going to play at Southern Indiana, averages 20 points a game, and they limited her to like 6 points yesterday. But they had two sisters, Kendall Hill and Bryn Hill, step up. One scored like 18, the other scored 16.
Correct, yeah.
And
And
Detweiler, don't forget
yeah,
Detweiler.
yeah,
I think she was.
That Detweiler girl was really good, and um, they deserved to win. They were clearly the better team, and I read somewhere on Twitter, and this was from a newspaper reporter or someone who covers down in that area where South Knox and North Knox is. North Knox gave South Knox probably their closest game of the
Oh, yeah.
tournament.
North Knox is a great program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they gave them their closest game of the tournament in the sectional championship. And this guy pointed out, and I really sat there and I thought about it, like that could have been the state championship
They
game.
might have been
You
the
really
best two
think about
teams.
it.
Yeah.
And like
Oh,
if North Knox had won that game, they probably would have been there yesterday.
maybe I
So
was thinking South Knox would be more like the Linton Stockton team that won back-to-back titles because that's what I thought. But that Linton Stockton team that won back-to-back titles,
they beat Tipton, yeah,
well,
and
beat Tipton,
Frankton
beat Franklin, they would have handled. They would have beaten South Knox, and it probably
Yeah,
would not have been
for sure.
close. I mean,
For sure.
and the Bob girl's good, but I guess Southern Indiana and really good. I mean, I like her. And what I liked about her, she kept trying. She didn't get down on herself. But I think one of the best 2A players as I was watching that and going on and not named Taisha Harris from Heritage, and the Heritage Christian girls because I don't
Right.
consider them
Next
2A
level.
players.
Yeah.
Would be Vanessa, Shafford, who played for Linton Stockton, who is a senior at USI and has had an outstanding career. And I think she's like all USI. She's in some record books down there. And um, but You going back, as I was watching, I thought, oh man, I guess when you watch and you look as you go each year, you sometimes you realize just you think a player is special when you watch her, and then you realize just how special Vanessa Shafford was at a 2A school.
Rensselaer yesterday. You mentioned them being number 2 in the state, correct?
Right.
They uh, if they were number 2 in the state, there was a large gap between 1 and 2. And I know Alexandria had them in a close game in the regional for a long time, and I really thought Alexandria would pull that off. Um, that Rensselaer team was not on the same level as South Knox, and where it's kind of funny where I was sitting on press row, the Rensselaer fans were like right behind me, like like they were breathing down my neck, and I was sitting in front of a nice family. I turned around, we exchanged some words at first that were pleasant, and they had a little girl who probably wasn't more than 11, 12 years old. Every time South Knox would shoot it, she would scream at the top of her lungs,
Wow.
shot, shot. And this was going on. I thought, I was like, okay, start of the game. I was like, they'll get down, she'll stop.
Right.
No, they got down 20. They were down 20 at one point. And when they got down 20, I turned around. I said, guys, I said, guys, you're down 20. I said, my ears are ringing. And it stopped after that. What was funny was the girl's mom, because the floor there is, they use it for college games as well. They can, change out the
Yeah.
center logo and everything. It's really neat.
Well, and
Uh,
that's you could tell the difference in some of the 3-point lines, and I think some of those
yeah,
girls got confused.
yeah. They had the 3-point
It
line.
can be confusing for sure.
Yeah, they had the
Yeah.
college 3-point line, and um, since it was the state finals, I was obviously, because they were breathing down my neck, I could hear everything they were saying before the game. The like mother of this family said, "Oh, it's the state championship, so they moved the 3-point line back." Oh, okay, that's cool. So we're gonna have to shoot deeper threes. And I turned around and I'm like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" I didn't say that, but I'm
Right.
like, no, I'll just let these people figure it out. So South Knox hit a three like right in front of where the actual line is, and they do the signal, throw the field goal hands up in the air, and say it's good. And she, that's not a three. That's not a three. And I turned around and I said, yes, it is. That's a three. So that was my funny story of the day.
Hey, I will say this: Rensselaer did have one player that I was impressed with. I really liked her, and that's the Van Meter girl.
Yeah, yeah. I'm there with you. I think Rensselaer.
I think she's the main reason. I think for as sloppy as that game was, and as poor shooting as both teams had, especially in that first half, she is the reason. I believe she's the reason that Rensselaer stayed with South Knox as long as they did.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean that Rensselaer team, um, they were obviously good enough to get there, but just South Knox was another animal, in my opinion. Just a
Yeah,
different level.
they were. I just like I said, I just hated it because I was like, oh my gosh, sloppy, sloppy, sloppy.
All right.
But
And
I realized neither one of them had been there before. But I mean, it's one thing. I've seen a lot of teams go and get there and not shoot well.
Hmm.
But to be that sloppy is what was so, I think, the unforced. There were some forced, but some of those unforced turnovers.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And in Class 3A was the big one for Grant Shouse and for us, Michelle, because before the sectionals even began, we said that sixth loss and ninth ranked Norwell had a really good chance to win the state championship, and we turned out to be right about that one. Norwell beat number one and unbeaten, the only unbeaten team in the state, Greensburg, and they handled them pretty good. Michelle, well, your thoughts on Norwell's big win over Greensburg?
Well, again, Norwell, even though they'd been there, they had a few. I think they struggled a little bit shooting early, and they had a few surprising turnovers. But I just Norwell was is just so impressive because I mean, they just Greensburg could never take Norwell out of what Norwell wanted to do. I mean, if Norwell didn't execute, I think it was more because they just got played too fast sometimes. And you think that when Norwell made mistakes, Grant, I thought it was just because they played too fast.
That's why it seemed.
And then I thought that when they, but I thought the longer the game went on, you could just tell that Norwell was not to be denied. And I do believe their experience, just the fact that those kids, whether they played in that game last year or were just down there, they were familiar with that atmosphere.
For
And
sure.
I thought their kids showed it. Not, but I will say this, you know, um, I could see why Greensburg got to that point undefeated.
And I want to say we've gone way too long without talking about Vanessa Rossworm.
Um, here's my view on it, guys. Last year I covered Norwell throughout their whole state tournament run. They lost to Gibson Southern in the championship in a game that me and my partner Derek Decker, who was doing it with me, he's a Norwell grad. He is Mr. Norwell. He happened to be he planned a trip ahead of time, so it kind of fell into my lap these past 2 weeks to do the games and do the play by play. But we did their entire run last year where they got beat. We went in saying, and I remember saying to some people last year before that Gibson Southern game that if they lose, I'll be shocked. I went in this year saying if they win, I'll be shocked. And I know you guys picked them, but seeing what this Norwell team did, I'm still stunned. I haven't processed what they did, and Vanessa Rossworm, we've like you said, we've gone so long without talking about her. Played all 32 minutes yesterday, 17 points, 10 rebounds. May have not shot the basketball the greatest, but made so many
Tell
impacts on
me,
the
what number
defensive
was
end.
she again, Grant? Because I'm trying to remember.
32, number
That's what I
32.
thought. Because I remember the little. Is it Macy? The number what?
Saul Frank,
24.
yeah, 24.
Yeah, she hit a couple of things, but 32. I just remember I'm sitting there thinking this 32 is impressive. I like her, and I was thinking they're going to win because she's not going
Yeah.
to let them lose.
That's right.
And Norwell, their 1-3-1 defense that they've been running for the last 3 or 4 years was the reason they won that game. And Rossworm is a 5'10", 5'11" guard that can play the front of that 1-3-1 and has so like her longs or her longs, her arms are long. Um she just plays the top of that zone so well. And doing this run and seeing them last week against Columbia City and getting to know their coach Eric Thornton over the last uh, year or so last season, it's so special to see it because these Norwell fans, the people involved, they scheduled up this year, and they were sitting at 3-3 at the start of the year, and their girls are sitting there like, why is this happening? Like we're going through some growing pains. It almost kind of felt like a rebuilding year, and then it turned into a reload year, and they lost to they were sitting at 3-3. They lost to Noblesville. They lost to Belmont in the regular season. And after that Belmont game, they woke up and they lost a game to Belmont they shouldn't have lost. It was
And improved it later.
yeah, and it was a rivalry game and an emotional game. Some other things I think going on surrounding that as well that played a factor. And um, they just I don't know what happened. They woke up and thankfully they did. And going into the semi-state, thankfully they got the draw away from Columbia City, where that's a huge rivalry game, just as big as it is with Belmont, where they're playing for a chance to go to the state championship. And when they won, you're checking the score from the game in the South, and I'm sitting there like, oh man, they're gonna have to go through. They're gonna have to go through Greensburg, and you look at that 27-0 record, and you're like, well, could this be the day? Could that be the game where the magic runs out? And
Yeah. And the defense in
Greensburg,
the second half was so good.
yeah, Greensburg made things interesting because every time in the first half, it seemed like when Norwell would go on a run, Greensburg had an answer and they threw a punch right back. The one we're not talking about that won the player that won the game for that team was Addie Norris. 16 points, 4 steals, and she came down and just grabbed the ball away from these Greensburg girls. And she's so quick. She's probably their point guard, one of their main guards, and was able to
Was
push it out.
is it number 3?
Number
What's her
2,
number?
number 2.
Number 2. Blonde, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
She
Yes.
made so many big plays on the defense, and she scored 16 points. The biggest play of the game came in the third quarter where Jada Dale, who's a starter, scored 3 points, got the ball, drove to the rack, laid it up, got fouled, it went in. That's when I thought, okay, they have a shot to win this. That was my first thought. Was she had the and one and she hit the free throw. It's like they might win this. But you're still sitting there like there's still a lot of time for Greensburg to come back. But when the horn went off, the jubilation through the stands there at Norwell, and I'm saying this because I was calling it for them. That this 3A game meant a lot more to me than the other 3.
And I think
I'm just so happy for Coach Thornton and company. They built that program from the ground up. He's been there for 28 years. They've developed the youth program, and they've known that this is possible, and they finally achieved that. And so for that to come true, and that's for any program, you want to see that happen to them when they spent so much time investing um, in the younger generations, and
he's,
they have elementary school teams that are really good right now, middle school teams that are good. So this
that's what I was gonna
Norwell
say.
team's not going away, even though they're moving up to 4A
No.
next year.
Oh, they'll
He's
be
a,
a
he's
true contender in
he's
4A, I think.
yeah. Well, he's a true Thornton has built a true program there. I believe I'm pretty sure I have met him
Hmm.
at coaches clinics before when I've gone with when back when Coach Comer was there, a few years ago. But yeah, outstanding coach. And I was going to say, Grant, I think you were probably more nervous because you had such an investment in Norwell.
I was,
I'm sitting
I
there.
was, man, I was on the edge of my seat.
I was sitting there as a just watching, um, as not because I wasn't really covering it, but just as a basketball fan in general, just liking
I, th-
basketball.
I think a
And
lot of people wanted to see Norwell win because even though Norwell clearly, I think, was the better team yesterday, on paper, people who are just the average fan, it's still kind of the David versus Goliath. It's the underdog a little bit. You know what I mean?
yeah, except I thought from the middle of the third quarter on, I thought Norwell controlled that. Yeah, Greensburg made a little bit of a run, but but they couldn't contain it because of Roswell and of the number 2, the little blonde.
Norris.
Every time there needed to be a big steal, a big deflection, or just a big defensive play, one of those 2 made it. And
Hmm.
and I just felt like the only concern, and I didn't get too worried, was when Norwell struggled from the free throw line a little bit, especially Macy's schedule, probably
Fall
missed
Frank.
more free throws than she's normally does. But still, I thought, they're missing them, but their defense is going to, as long as they make one of 2, their defense is going to be good enough because they're really not going to give up an uncontested 3.
What I think I failed to mention to you guys is that team that went to the state last year with Norwell, they graduated 4 starters.
That's right.
They had 7
Yes.
seniors on that team. The only returning player from last year was Rossworm, and that's why so many people thought that, like, okay, they're going to go through some growing pains this year, but next year, talking about this next season now, is going to be the year they could win it. Nobody really thought that. That's why it's so shocking that nobody really thought that this year they could do it.
I bet with that and those numbers, and yeah, last year's team probably helped get there so well because of what they're practicing against every day, and obviously because this group
That's what,
went
yeah.
back and finished the deal.
All right, and in Class 4A, the state champion was a team that about 6 weeks ago was 10-8 and on a 4-game losing streak. Lawrence North took down number 5 Warsaw after earlier in the postseason taking down number 1 or number 2 and defending state champion Lawrence Central and the defending 3A state champion Gibson Southern. What a run it was for Lawrence North and a big win over Warsaw and a really good team effort.
Yeah. The difference in that game, the true difference in that game, was the Thomas player
Mhm.
Lawrence North Thomas inside the post. I mean, that's the reason, that's really the big reason that Lawrence North won. She was
I
a
agree.
load inside. I mean, hard to stop. And defensively, because she was in some foul trouble, she didn't do as much, except the boards. I mean, you just couldn't get around her to get enough. I mean, you might get some offensive rebounds, but I mean, she was just such a big post presence for them.
I noticed early in the second quarter that the physicality of Lawrence North started to become a problem for Warsaw. That was the by far the most physical team Warsaw played this year.
Yes.
And we stuck around after the game, the 3A game, because we're obviously,
Basketball junkies.
yeah, we're basketball junkies, and obviously we're still like trying to process what we just watched in the 3A game. And we stuck around, and in the third quarter, Kevin Helfrich, who was doing the game with me, he turned to me and he goes, "If this is out of hand in the third quarter, by the end of the third, I'm out." I said, "I'm out too." So we got all the stuff gathered up and we took our time, used the restroom, went up the elevator, and we got up to the level where we were going to go walk out of the building, look at the score. Warsaw got it down to an 8-point game. They were just down 18. And in that time, for us to walk or to go up in the elevator, they got it down within 10 or 8. And then they got it down to 6. And it's like, let's hang. Let's hang. Let's watch this a little bit. We ended up leaving with about a minute and a half to go, and Lawrence North was up 8 or 9. And in the time we walked from the field house to the car, and I got on my phone and looked at the score, it was down to 3-point game. So Warsaw chipped at it, would never go away, and you got to give them credit. I think I didn't see the ending, so it could have been too little, too late, but that Warsaw team deserved to be there. I mean, they beat the number one team, Hamilton Southeastern, for a reason, and they're so well coached with Lenny Krebs, and I really like Stephen Thomas, the coach there at Lawrence North. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins a few more state championships. But I saw Lawrence North first game of the year at Hamilton Southeastern, and I was I'll be honest with you, I wasn't impressed. I really was. I thought Hamilton Southeastern is a juggernaut. Nobody's beating them, and when Warsaw beat them, I was stunned. But
Yeah, me too.
um,
I wasn't stunned though, was I,
No, she
Greg?
was not. She
I
actually
was
kind
not
of
stunned.
picked Warsaw.
you're never
Um,
stunned, are you, Michelle?
no, I can be. I wasn't so much then, and I'm sometime, Grant, I'll tell you
She
why.
believes in magic.
I do too.
And that's but Warsaw is really what I like about Warsaw is, and they not gone cold from the field um, for a bit there in the third quarter, that could have been a different outcome.
Maybe,
Um,
yeah.
because they did go cold. And but the Winchester girl, I mean, what impresses me about Warsaw is, yes, that they're I consider them unflappable.
Hmm.
They just didn't. I mean, they play through their highs and they play through their lows with that same confident demeanor. It's like they don't worry when they get down, or if they worry, you don't see it. They don't let their opponent see a weakness.
Yeah.
That's what's that's what's
And that's the
impressive out of the
recipe.
players.
That's the recipe to a championship team, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, they don't have a player that shrugs or gets upset. That you
Uh-uh.
concede, where sometimes, that's
I
what body
saw that a
language.
couple times yesterday in some games. Like girls would get down and they would, I'm not gonna say who, but they would get down and they would pout when they had to come off the floor because they were in foul trouble, and it cost them the game, and that happened with one of the teams that lost. But that just happens with inexperience, in my opinion. You do that because you're not mature enough as a basketball player to handle those kind of situations.
I say hats off to the four state championship teams. Hats off to the four state runner-up teams, and I want to give a great big round of applause for Jane Schott, who in her first year as an assistant commissioner got the 50-year anniversary for women's basketball under the HSA, and did a tremendous job putting on the 50th state finals and all the hard work she put into it along the way, those interviews, the reclips, and the
Yeah.
celebration of everything. I just say, and Jane will say, it takes all of them, and it is great. But you know, I know a lot of the. I mean, I know that Jane enjoyed it so much and has a lot as a former great basketball player herself. I know she had a lot of fun doing what she did, and she deserves a tremendous round of applause for her first year of coming in and doing all that. Wow.
Yeah, and I just quickly, I know because we're running out of time, but quickly, I want to touch on that too. What a storyline it was for Warsaw to win the 50th and then get back, or win the first and then get back there for the 50th. That was so cool. And one of the things that I want to
That's what I
mention.
meant by she believes in magic.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm there with you. And one of the cool things is I'm a broadcaster and um, someone who does the state championship every year, boys or girls. Rita Price Simpson at WRSW's, but she did the very first state championship, and has done every single one since. She was doing all four yesterday. Got to talk with her a little bit, and um, it's so cool because she's one of the pioneers, kind of in that field, and that she's done every single one, and she was recognized before every game. And the way they did things, bring back former teams, and like the very first Final Four team with the Warsaw team obviously got a huge ovation from their crowd, and then the Miss Basketballs and former coaches. It was really cool, and hats off to the IHSA. 100% got it right, did it right, and I'm honestly a little sad that it's over because I really enjoyed everything they did leading up to it to kind of celebrate it. It was cool to preserve that history. So hats off to all eight teams, because when you get to the state championship, nobody ever really loses. Everybody wins in a certain way. There's never really a loser that comes out of it.
Having been part of one that made a run, having been part of two teams, one we that almost came close in 2014, losing to Canterbury in a heartbreaker, and then getting there in 2021. People, I don't know that everybody, fans, really understand the grind it is and just how much work it takes in, you know, from your head coach all
It's
the way
such a long
down.
week.
It is not just the week. It's a long grind. Sectional, regional, semi-state. It's a long 4 week grind to get there. Like I said, a lot of preparation, and a lot of that starts early. You start scouting possible teams in December that you might face, not just in sectional, but if you really believe your team's that good, you start looking at who your possible regional opponents are going to be, who your possible semi-state, just so that you have good knowledge and you can prepare your team, as a staff. And it takes a lot of work from the coaches and the staff, and then it takes a lot of work of dedication and hard work from the kids, and being focused and paying attention and trusting their coaching staff and what they're telling them and the scouting reports they get, and then going out and executing game plans.
Michelle, Grant, thank you so much for your time. It was a great girls basketball season. Wish we'd had a local team down there, but we didn't. So we kind of adopted some, and it was a lot of fun covering girls basketball all year with you, Michelle and Grant.
Thank you so much, Greg.
It was great, Greg. Thanks.
Thank you so much to Michelle and Grant for joining the Central Indiana Sports Report once again and providing you a lot of good content. And thank you for listening. Please go subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Central Indiana Sports Report. We are very easy to find. Central Indiana Sports Report is a product of ITG Media. I love Susie.